Hello. Hello. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm Keira, very grateful you're all here. This is a talk I've been looking forward to a lot because of the people involved, because of the context and the space we're in, and because of the program that is linked to it, specifically inside CASTRO. As you all know, CASTRO is a space for alternative learning, and this year we started an alternative learning library that is open to everyone, and it's built collaboratively. So each person can both come in and leave a post-it about something they think should be added to the library, but also come in and read. We also invite professionals and people we have a high esteem of to suggest books, which of course we have in the Met as well. So tonight is one of the talks that is in this series of talks connected to the library. I'm also very happy because it's at Fondazione Giuliani, and very grateful to Adrian for letting us do it here, because CASTRO is small, it has a lot of artists in at the moment, and also because it's through Adrian that I know of Ahmet's work. And as an artist who is interested in these kinds of practices, have been illuminating and also very helpful to see how you talk about your work and what you do. I'm also very grateful that Keira and Chris are here, that are going to be moderating the talk and asking some questions, but it's really important that this is not a frontal discussion, so each of you is part of this talk, so jump in at any time. I hope it's okay if I say that. Questions, provocations, we have a master of provocations here, so don't worry. Bring them in. I asked Keira and Chris to come in and moderate this talk because, well, in general, CASTRO invites people who we have crossed paths with in different times of our life, CASTRO's life. And I met Chris in London, and he runs a space called FORMA, and he does it in an incredible way. Yesterday we were talking, and he said that FORMA takes FORMA is an Italian word, so it takes the shape of and voice of the artist that goes away. That's so precious, so generous, and very, very rare. So thank you for coming, and I think you're going to be very important in this talk for the way that you ask questions and the way that you see artists. And also, I'm very, very glad that Keira is here. We have started talking, and we have a long way to go talking about how to support emerging artists. Keira is the curator of Bloomberg New Contemporaries, and the institution has, how many years has it been going?
75 years.
Wow. Has an incredible history of doing it, and I think that each person that comes in brings a completely different approach, and the way you talk about the research that you're doing makes me very hopeful, and yeah, I wish I was a new contemporary at that time. So thank you for joining us. We're gonna have Ahmet talk sometime about his practice and about a number of schools. Well, I didn't introduce you because I give it for granted that everyone knows you. One thing I want to say about you is that and I was saying this at dinner yesterday as well, I'm so in awe of the way that you speak about yourself, and the words you use for me have been very important. So when I read artist and initiator, that makes me, I don't know why, so I need to figure it out, but that's something, and you really are. When people are around you, especially this summer, we met because Ahmet was in the selection panel for this year's students at CASTRO, and you really initiated a couple of conversations. Yeah, so we look forward to hearing what you have to say. And then we're going to have a moment where Chris and Keira are going to ask some more questions, and then I really hope that you will have questions as well. So while we're talking, please think about it, and we're really happy if you can join in and share your thoughts, because that's what CASTRO is about. Talking about things in a circle. Of course, we couldn't do it tonight because you're too many and because the room is the way it is, but that's what CASTRO is. It's not about teaching one way, it's about us teaching each other at the same time. So thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you all for coming. It's so nice to be back here. 2011, I did my first show in Rome, one of my first solo exhibitions, and I had a very generous invitation to do the show here. And years later, I was invited to CASTRO serie with great hospitality. Thank you so much for having me here. Today, I'm not here as an artist. I'm here as presenting my involvement with platforms and ideas as initiator. Then we can discuss these terms happily. And so I did a selection of 5 platforms, ideas that I have involved, and then we can continue with the discussion. Before all that, I put some of the very usual suspects examples, but important examples. Here I put Black Mountain College here with School Vegan School of Painting, where I was as a tutor last summer. It's just interesting to see, one of this Black Mountain College was the first interdisciplinary and very horizontal kind of structure, so it's always an example to start with, but quite Western perspective in that sense. But School Vegan is no more in the US. It's artists for artists kind of place, and it's and I think it's interesting to go somewhere that was initiated first in 1947. When I was there last summer, and pretty much the energy and what you get as an experience in a place like that, walking in the dark at night, you realize you go back to the core of art making, and in an environment that there is this communal feeling. I started thinking about education, radical pedagogy, also around 2011. The time I did show here, it was the first time I did the work with other artists' works, so I come up with ideas, including other artists' works here, and it was kind of a new time for me, where I was invited to a residency in London by Tate Modern and Delphine Foundation, and I was asked particularly to do a community project, and it was a time that a lot of artists, many artists initiated art schools or schools, which comes from earlier traditions basically, but it was an era there was many examples of them. Here I put 2 examples, and one of it, and both of them are still running. One is from Mexico, initiated in 2009, and the other one is Darjasur, also in this here. Can tell you more proper information about this art and research center, very important one since 2014, and some other examples. Sometimes it's initiated by the artists, sometimes it's initiated by the curators or the local artist community. Masal Alexander is another example, also more or less the same time, like 2010. It started initiated by Raccolta Sharkey, and Homeworks has been there in the Beirut Ashkar Alba Homeworks program. Started in 2011, and then some UK examples, because we will have also UK related examples, but this was one when I was arriving to London. One of the projects was discussed at the University of Local Knowledge by Susan Lacy and Penny Abrams, and Anti-University is an old example, but it came back also later in 2015. Anyway, going back to my involvement, it started with Science University. I was invited to this residency that was supposed to last only 1 year, and I was very critical of the concept of being a community, like doing a community project. What does it mean, and how can I have a temporary engagement with the community? I just started observing, because there was, within the residency, they first invited me for the research period, and I was working with a smaller foundation and a very large museum, and I get to see all the different kind of organizations and institutions, how a large museum collaborate with smaller grassroots institutions in London specifically, and how generous depends on the scale of the institutions they could be. So I had this idea because when going around different community centers, I saw there is a gap that must be filled by someone, because I saw that people were categorized in kind of like ways that I wouldn't work with people in those categories, like all elderly people, or young teenagers from Albania, or you know, based on like or neighborhood, Peckham, specific neighborhood. So I didn't want to think in those categories, and anyway, those community organizations, they were taking care of that very well. As an artist coming from outside, doing a happy workshop wasn't enough thing for me to imagine community work. And also, like, socially engaged art as a kind of like a term was always, I was critical of that as well. I don't take any term by default, so I have to think about it, I have to think why we use those terms and what can we do with those. Science University grew quite much over the years, now 12 years or something we are talking about. And it spread, the idea spread to many different countries, cities, places, and a lot of organizations involved. And currently we still have active 2 branches, one in Stockholm, one in the Ruhr area in Germany, so one in Sweden. And it's this is what I wanted to see. Like I didn't want to even talk about it until the first 5 years, because usually art institutions, like my residency was limited to 1 year engagement, so I had a contract as an artist for 1 year, and before that year ended, I told the institutions that this is going to be a parasitic institution. You're not talking to an artist anymore, you're talking to this institution, and you need to negotiate accordingly. And I was talking to the institutions this way. So they had to learn very quickly to see Science University as an institution itself. Basically, the idea was to, when I went to London, I saw that there is no organization focusing on people coming from any background, any language, but they have higher education like in their countries, and they were unable to perform that teaching or transfer that knowledge because they didn't have the basic requirements for the authorization. That means like they didn't have ID cards, they didn't have mailbox to send a letter, to receive the letter, they didn't have bank accounts, and so when you don't have these basic documents, you cannot really focus or think about teaching or knowledge exchange. And so my idea was not to think this is like disability of the people who try to integrate themselves to a system, because integration is also kind of exported. It's not their idea to be integrated. So let's reverse the situation, and instead of authorization, we go with the recognition. Let's do immediate recognition, and let's call them professors, teachers, consultants, lecturers right away, and in the language they choose to exchange knowledge. So people in the room have to figure out how to understand that knowledge, instead of the teacher trying to struggle to learn the central language, like if it is English or Swedish or German, instead of like spending years going through all this process and trying to get another diploma the second time, that they already have back in their countries. We jump over all this long process of like be 10 years, 20 years of process, by the way, we are talking about. In UK, it was already a very long process. It was a little shorter in Sweden, for instance. But at the end, no one can think about knowledge or knowledge exchange normally under those conditions. Silent University enabled people to be able to do that. How? So when we reverse the situation, this immediate recognition started to bring the authorization as well. So people start getting actually permits, like after the first or second year, they start getting even citizenship through involvement of this education platform. I also knew that my presence in UK was temporary. I was there with temporary visa, and later I didn't have visa. So even if I start something like this, it should not be dependent on my own energy and my own time or availability. It should be transparent that all participants come. They can first prepare lectures and focus on what they want to share. But later, if they are willing to, they can become coordinators and organizers themselves, so they can run their own branch. So the whole idea was designed like that, and this is eventually what happened. Some of the branches last a few years, and some of them are still lasting up to 12 years because of that. Even though sometimes like the directors change, curators change. First we had like a curator from that country coordinating things, and then our participants took over and they became coordinators themselves, and they were later in charge of the budget themselves, and I also became a guest. They invited me as a guest afterwards, like, can you come and be part of this panel discussion? We will pay you this fee. So it's really reversed the situation, and then institutions immediately, these are all coordinators from Mülheim branch, and they will actually, two of them, Justin and Bridget, will come to a conference in Venice in May. So some of them can travel, but in the beginning, actually, most of our participants couldn't travel between the countries. So this was pre-COVID times. We had to imagine video lectures and lectures from distance, but the whole condition was that everyone has to be paid. And translation can be done in multiple languages right at that moment in that room. So we don't assume everybody speaks English or Italian or German. Everybody in the room translates for each other. Or if there is budget, they have even simultaneous translations sometimes. The German branch has that. They do at least 2-3 simultaneous translations and 5 languages in every brochure and publication they do. So they sometimes give the format of lecturing and conferences. Sometimes this format turns into gardening, or teaching Arabic while gardening, or Swedish, or other things. So we had certain principles, or taking care of, like, this is Women Empowerment Network they needed in Mülheim, that they needed another group that women can attend to those meetings. Some of them couldn't attend mixed meetings. So ideas came after other ones, so it could evolve into the local needs, local branch needs, but then we also keep the contact between the branches, and whenever it's possible, some of them travel instead of me, give lectures about Silent University. So we have many people giving lectures about Silent University or their own branch in other occasions. Sometimes they directly get even the invitations. Everything has to be in multiple languages. So we had very much from the beginning, I had to figure out how to make it not dependent on me. So I'm fighting for it, but also fighting against it all the time. I just withdrew from one Silent University co-organized symposium just recently. So I have to sometimes get out. In order to keep the balance, in order to keep the openness, freedom, because it's not about like registering it as a kind of like association and always running after it. If somebody wants to make their own version, if they don't stay with the principles that we have, like practical principles and ideological principles since the day one, and we develop them over the time. Very simple principles: everybody must be paid. If they don't have bank accounts, it's institutions' responsibility to figure out how to pay. So if necessary, we have a Zoom call with the Skype call with the accountant of the institution, explain the concept. And then they actually find a solution. Every time, even in Germany, they found a solution. So, so you see these things are actually possible. When they think creatively, it's part of like, so the administration and bureaucracy, it's part of the, the process. It's not like some backstage thing that's individually you need to figure out and cry in the back like, oh, they didn't pay my fee kind of situation, like a lot of precarious artists have to deal with. And sometimes I need to do a lot of fight for those things, but with Silent University we do upfront. We talk about that internally within the institution. Everyone involved knows about the concept, understands this is a parasitic organization, arrives with its own principles. We don't arrive to somebody else's principles. So it doesn't matter if the institution cannot handle, they're out. So our collaborating institutions, they stay in only when they can handle our principles. And these are like principles must be normally, in general, already adopted by those institutions if they really want to be diverse and inclusive in a real way. They need to do that, not in a symbolical way, like inviting undocumented people and not paying them and saying that they cannot pay. Like a simple lie, especially in Italy, you can pay anyone undocumented. If you hire them in a certain amount of time, you can actually pay them. You can hear some biennials or foundations don't even tell that while knowing that they can. So if they want, they can do it. Anyway, so now each branch is independent. They can do their presentations. So it's growing in the direction it's needed, and it continues because everyone's kind of wherever puts more input and merit in the platform, they are in it. Whoever wants to abuse it and wants to just take the money and run, they cannot stay in it. They have to disappear. And no one needs to control or police the situation, including me, So if I abandon the principles and try to do it like my own way, I will be also left out. This is Fahima. So if it's not easy to get in the beginning. I mean, I was involved always, most of the time in the beginning, talking to people. And once you have people like Fahima, it comes with another 20, another 30, another 40 people. Fahima is the most trusted person in Stockholm at the moment, also wins this local hero award, and developed the best language school in Stockholm through the Silent University and the TESAM also. So we have orientation programs and try to spread the word, so we don't immediately go everywhere and make a branch. When we are asked in the context of exhibitions or temporary engagements, we either say no, or we use it as a kind of orientation program situation that if there is an understanding of that this can exist in the long run, it can. So this was one of the cases, like in Istanbul. So it's not only full of success stories, it's a lot of branches or places that are super excited, they want to do it, but they don't want to put the necessary commitment to it. And when they don't want to put the necessary commitment to it, it's their failure. So I don't see it as Silent University's failure anymore, at least, because we proved that it could work in some of the branches, which does not exist in the art world, by the way. You don't see things last 10 years. You don't see things last in collaboration with institutions that long. It's no way, because direct exchange of people working there changes all the time. So the concept needs to be strong and needed and needs to be sincere. So when you keep up those things, when I say two principles, it goes quite well. These are many different orientation programs we tried. We actually at some point had a branch in France, in Paris, well funded, and we had our own office, and I shut it down, this office, because they couldn't find a single lecture for almost a year. So I said, you don't want the branch, you have to shut it down, or you have to go learn how to talk to your community. In a neighborhood where 85% of the people are coming from elsewhere. So if the institution doesn't know, they can have the budget, we refuse the budgets, which we refuse the institution. If they don't really know, or they don't really mean to have this for real, it won't happen. It won't even open at the first place. So usually test institutions at least a year, and then if they are committed enough, they pass to the second stage. So it's not the other way around. As fast as possible, 12 years of experience with Ahmet University. I'm going to give you a few other examples, like how I think about, like, this was a great learning example. I've been teaching all the time in many different schools, giving workshops, courses, and things like that. Guest professor or lecturing and all this. And I learned a lot from that experience and tried to apply to other experiences. So this was a project starting in 2014 where it's in a different order, but I can start with this one. Again in 2014-15, after the uprising in Istanbul, can we imagine not silent university, but maybe a kind of master program that does not exist in Turkey at that moment, because state universities were kind of hijacked by the government or put in exile. All the good teachers left, and the private universities were really fragmented, and each maybe had one good professor and so on. So there wasn't one single school you could say that it's horizontal, open to everyone, and you can go have reasonable education at the time. And it was after the uprising, so I thought it's a good time maybe to create a platform, a school called School of Urgency, and kind of culture studies school that can operate with complete solidarity and full horizontality. So my involvement would be very short, maybe 3 months or 6 months, and then they run it. With that, we started a School of Urgency. We had also principles, so I tried to transfer everything I learned from and compare to silent university members and participants and lecturers. And this is more privileged situation for the students, like, okay, some of them are coming from Anatolian towns, they don't speak English, but some of them were like privileged, they speak English or maybe other languages, or coming from, families they can afford to go to study abroad. I wanted to mix the situation and really create self-run school, and they take over faster, so I thought they could do it faster than silent university process. And it went quite well. As individuals, they were incredible, but as a collective, they were a disaster because they didn't imagine how to invite. So when I invited them, I said, I trust you, you have the key of this place, it's yours now. But you need to learn how to fire yourself. I'm not going to fire you, nobody will fire you. You have to tell yourself, I am not needed in this place. I need to give the opportunity to somebody else, and also explain to somebody else, the next ones, some sort of true principles to invite the next group. What happened that the first group, while I was there, we were able to form it, and we got immediately very big opportunities, but they were unable to. After the 5th month, I left when they thought they were ready. I didn't think they were ready, so I didn't. But anyway, I left, and then they kept the space, and they continued 4 more months. They started accepting new people, but they were not prepared enough, so it lasted like 1 year. So this one didn't last like 10, 12 years. And I knew it wasn't. When I was leaving, I knew it wasn't the right time. But because I wanted to make 100% horizontal, I knew I was going to go out. I left when they thought it's the right time. And each one went to big programs and all that. Like we have, some people see this as a successful example, successful maybe arts world example, but as a failure, as a kind of an independent radical example that could like multiply. So by now I would imagine this multiplied all around Anatolia and Turkey and also beyond, with zero budget project, horizontal version of that, some sort of culture studies master program. I mean, we have amazing guests, by the way. Istanbul was having, like, we had initiators of Occupy Wall Street was there. We had a lot of artists coming for the Biennale. They came. Everybody wanted to be invited to this program, like really big names. But that's not enough. No, this is good for a start. And going back to the other project, around the same time, my mind was occupied with these things. In US, we were doing a small project with Chris Rawcliffe and then later I invited other artists. Actually, I come up with this concept. There was a thing called Rolling Jubilee Strike Debt Collective, which happened after Occupy Wall Street. So the biggest debt in US was student debt, and every other debt, if you have health or real estate debt, you can claim bankruptcy. But when you have student debt, you cannot. You have to pay it back, and it's a big amount of money we're talking about. So if you want to go to have higher education, go to some art school in US, you have to imagine you are signing a loan of up to $200,000, $300,000, and this adds up over the years. So it goes 20 years, 30 years of your life trying to pay back this student loan. But Rolling Jubilee was an idea by Occupy Wall Street involved groups, a strike debt group, and they just in US. Government don't go after everybody door to door, so they just send it to some private agency, cheap, these loans. So instead of $1, they sell it for 1 penny, so very cheap. And then they go after people, they ask every month $1,000 or whatever they need to get. So Rolling Jubilee was a concept that, okay, we become this private agency, we fundraise like $700,000 US dollars, and we can abolish $30 million student debt if you fundraise 700. And that's what they did. They fundraised that much. This was the last screenshot I took. For a few years they did that. So they could abolish like I think 31 million, almost $32 million student debt, just sending people that they don't have to own anything anymore. So I collaborated with them. I thought, okay, what art can do in this situation? So I invited other artists. Like here you can see a sculpture by Martha Rosner. These are all either coin-operated machines, so they also collect money. This is a coin vortex, and it has all the statistics about everything wrong about student loan issue in US. So these sculptures were supposed to travel to many institutions, but it was very hard thing to commission this in US because many institutions didn't want to commission do it because. The first one already didn't want to do it because after they heard the idea, because they said they will lose their license. This is a too political project. So, but then we did it actually in a university museum in East Lansing, and we were able to commission the first sculptures, and it traveled outside US afterwards. So this is Natasha Sadrahagin's Manish Reddit donation box. My monolith inspired from Stanley Kubrick's movie that you can hear podcasts when you put money inside. This is Dan Perjovsky's plastic bag. When you put more money, you become an angel. And then the project, very simple artworks. And, the idea was there's a contract, so if this is sold also in the secondary market, or they collect money in every exhibition and we send it to the strike debt, Rolling Jubilee. But also, if it's sold and speculated in the market, I call this a counter-financial strategy project. All money still goes to the same organization, so it's good to speculate these sculptures. This is the UK version. Later, I was invited to do it within the framework of a British art show, and because in UK, these fees were introduced in 1998 before it was free education. And then it started with £1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 9,000. I don't know how much now. My information is from 2014, probably a lot worse. And anyway, so they were interested to tour this around UK, and British Art Show is traveling 2 years all around. So I asked Liam Gillis, who's a healer, and Goshko Majuka to do UK sculptures that will travel around UK. And they collected money. Also, we did collect a lot of money actually during each exhibition. All the money went to UK equivalent of Jubilee campaign. And these are the other sculptures we did. So I wanted to speculate like how we can turn this into long-term strategies. Like if it's not just a sculpture, not one time, how we can really use it as a kind of counter-financial strategy as well. sometimes it's I get the opportunity just for like short period of time. This was only 3 days event. Art Dubai invited me to do an educational project in a 3-day event. And I said, okay, I asked some questions to them. I asked, do you have interns? They said yes. I said, how many? They're like around 70, 80. I asked if they are paid. They said no, they're unpaid interns. I said, do they have a place to hang out? They said no. I said, okay, let's make a VIP lounge only for interns. And so collectors, other people cannot enter. And it will be guarded, and only interns can go and hang out inside. I mean, we really make it a nice, cozy place. So there was like a chocolate fountain, massage service, table tennis, and all these things, and coffee, everything. You can get snacks, Wi-Fi. You can just go chill there. And we got this very central place and giant logo. So a lot of people thought it's just a VIP lounge. They can attend a lot of VIPs because they have already 4 different VIPs. You know, like Cartier, Aprile VIP, and all these different VIPs. So they tried to go in and they couldn't. I think Mr. Giuliani also tried to enter and it wasn't allowed. And he was really angry. And then came to me later and congratulated me, Ahmet, this is a great project, I couldn't enter. Anyway, so it was also a program. There was a program about workspace, office space, and labor. So if they are interested, they could come watch the program. If not, they can just hang out in the back. I invited curators and artists, actually well-known ones, but they didn't know them. If they are interested in the topic, they will come and sit, listen to the talk. Otherwise, they can just play in the back or just chit-chat. Later, this moved to within an exhibition to Pompidou. I was asked to recreate the VIP lounge, and this time we had 3 months, so it was a longer period of time. And in France, there was already a kind of fight for interns to get paid by a collective called Precarious Generation. And they did 10 years of this fight, and they changed the government policy, so actually all the interns had to be paid in France a certain amount of time, at least they could be hired. Anyways, I invited this collective and all the other interns around France, interning in any art institutions, to come use this space on the 5th floor of Pompidou. And we used never exhibited artworks from the collection, so we decorated the space with artworks from the collection never exhibited, quite weird artworks. And also the furniture from the director's room and all this, so it was really like 3 months long shared space for all the interns at that moment in Paris. Okay, finishing up with something quite new. After the last year's earthquake, I mean just before actually I had this idea, but it was rather a museum in my hometown for big children. Contemporary art museum with children, because it's a place highly, it's a Kurdish part of Turkey and highly politicized. So anyone over 18 can be arrested anytime, you know, for just walking on the streets. And to imagine a museum there is quite bureaucratic and like it's a very complicated thing to imagine. But when you work with children, there is space for it. Somehow everyone becomes friends, and there is some space for contemporary art as well. There are only small initiatives there so far, so we never had a museum there in any form. So I had this idea, but then the earthquake happened and everything changed. And after that, we just turned into the workshop format. So it's the first time I started working in terms of pedagogy with kids, and I'm not an experienced when it comes to kids artist. So I work with friends who have been working with children, pedagogue friends for over 15-20 years. And they always work with kids traumatized from the war times or natural disasters and all that. For many different occasions and also during normal times, normal kind of times. So I invited, so the concept is basically to do peer-to-peer workshops, children, cultural workers' children. They are usually seen as extra when an artist travels, they have to fight for their children to come with, and institutions resist, or so. have to always like find a way, and there's a lot of activism about parents of like artist parents or creator parents or cultural worker parents, but I wanted to just think with the children. So this time actually children are invited as the teachers, the tutors, to do these workshops, and their parents happen to be cultural workers, and they come as assistants to the children. So officially invite goes to the child, and if they agree, then parents ask to agree. If they agree, then they all come. Children get paid fee, they come up with the topic. So this is a stress ball workshop done by my own daughter. We did the first one. So she wanted to do a stress ball workshop, and we went to my hometown with the first workshop. And later another artist, quite well-known artist, Fondazione daughter, did the second workshop. So they did blindfold paintings, and then we turned into a tree, wish tree. And so every time, this is a very different experience, because this, you mentioned this, most of these children, they travel with the parents like an extra all the time, but they actually learn a lot about the art world, and they see a lot of cultures. They usually speak multiple languages, but they're never asked to use those skills. They're all still treated as some sort of parasite. So again, this kind of reverse situation. Now we are working on this multiple workshop run by cultural workers, children. So far we did since last year 4 of them. Yes, as fast as I can. I think we can move to the conversation part. Thank you.
Beautiful presentation. When we've spoken, we've got about 20 minutes. We've prepared a few questions and we'll respond to your presentation, and then we'd really like to open to the floor. Chris, I don't know if you want to start.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing just a few of your many projects. And I was picking up on a word that's come twice in your presentation, parasitic. You first mentioned it early on. You said you're a parasitic institution. And I thought that was a wonderful paradox between the idea of a parasite who enters the host, maybe consumes, finds a way to grow and survive. And I like that kind of punk attitude, maybe activist attitude, and then the institution, which is the organised space, the space that can repeat activity and do it, better and better. And then there's a paradox there, which I see throughout your work often. You bring in humour with very serious social or economic injustices, and somehow you find this way. And I was going to challenge you to say that I think that maybe you're a secret activist, but actually you said it yourself, you're a parasitic institution. And I guess what I wanted to start with is that just here you presented quite a few projects, but obviously if you look at your wider practice on top of this, you've initiated many activities which are collaborative, participatory, challenging, and have this kind of activist element to them, a desire for change. And I guess my question is how do you let go of these? How do you live with all of these activities which you've initiated and are making the change for good in the art world but in society? And where's the place where you let go or hold on or exist with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't use the term activist because the moment you institutionalize it, it doesn't work. You have to do it quietly, you have to do it, there should be tenderness, discreetness, and, there should be all those things attached to it. When necessary, anonymously, when necessary, you put your name up front to take risk and all that stuff. But to use the term, as I said, I was also against terms by default. Not what they do, being community engaged or socially engaged artists and this kind of terminologies. So I try to work outside of those terminologies. Parasitic institution comes from the conversations early on when I started Science University initiation 2011 in London. There was Jan Abdurrahman also working on a very special project and kind of theorizing that, how to act parasitic within institutions. There's always this thing to doing things from inside and stuff like that, but parasitic is a little bit different. Because also outside university, like we are not like hired by the institution, because when you are hired by the institution, or you might put as an artist to do a commission, they put usually a contract in front of you. And I used to not read these contracts. I used to trust the curators, and they just invite me. I'm not sure they're nice people that signed this. I don't really need to read this. So I was the one who would never read the contracts, and I became like artists who worked with contracts and read them. Actually, they modify them, and they're always having pain with me. But if I trust still, I don't do it. But I trust less after the second conversation most of the time. So if the first conversation goes well, I still don't read it. Don't get me wrong. But this is less and less happening. Then I negotiate. So I became a negotiator when it comes to this kind of things, but I don't negotiate only for myself. I don't call this a kind of activism. I just think like next artist comes, shouldn't deal with the same thing over and over again. So this is a very important part in all this like negotiations, how the negotiations are done. In all these projects, there's long negotiations, but sometimes delightful. Not always like tough and sad.
And is it fair to say that most parasites, their aim is to not kill the host? That these activities are using or enforcing change, but not to the point where you take over or destroy the institution. In fact, you said in some instances you pull back when there's resistance, and like a parasite might do and leave.
Yeah, it's the intention of the institution. Like my intention is clear, so I try to also write them down as principles, set of principles that we can collectively adapt and we can collectively adjust. But if the institution doesn't really have the intention, then it doesn't work, So the collaboration ends there. If they lie to you openly, if they lie to the public, if they are not sincere to their public, if they don't really want to change but want to do some just superficial makeup, so cosmetic, let's see. So then it doesn't work. And when you realize at that moment it doesn't work, how much you want to work hard and bring your true self within that collaboration, it won't work. So better to get out before you just destroy and burn out yourself from that situation. So it's very important to get out early of such one-sided intention situation. But sometimes there is intention. The institution can be naive or really didn't figure out how to do it. They really want to do it and they trust you. And if they trust you, that means they take risk. And then you actually bring an institution together with the institution into a better place. And also for the future collaborators, who will come. Everybody will enjoy that outcome.
Thank you. I've got a two-part question, which is maybe just to dig a bit deeper into your role as an artist and the role of institutions. I wanted to read the International Council of Museums definition of an institution. So a museum or institution is not-for-profit, to the public, accessible and inclusive. It fosters diversity and sustainability. They operate and communicate ethically, professionally, and with the participation of communities. It carries on, offering varied experiences for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. I guess with that in mind, it'd be really interesting to hear a bit more about where does the role as an artist begin and end. So you're kind of an artist, and then the second part of the question is, what kind of institutions can't handle the principles?
Okay, so you can see everything is written in the definition, right? You just have to read the definition back to, every time you collaborate with the museum or institution, back to them, remind them. Also the policies, most of the institutions actually supposed to publish their code of conduct publicly, so it's accessible, supposed to be. If not, you can always request it. If they don't do it, that means you should collaborate with them. If they refuse it or if they come up with excuses, it should be there. But then when it's written in there, in the definition or in the code of conduct, and they are not practicing it, it's also still a problem, even though they put it there, everything seems transparent, but operationally they are not transparent. They do not love public, they sometimes hate it, you know. It could be a university and they hate students, art students, you know, professors. I heard conversations among professors saying they don't like the students. So, but they get full-time payment, full-time jobs from museums and universities, you know, to be there to serve to public. So it's not one-sided. So a museum does not exist without the collaborators, temporary contractors, artists, if they get paid or not, you know, all this. So again, I go back to the intentions. Contracts, once a lawyer friend, art lawyer friend of mine said, Martin said that, contract is just a contract. Actually, most of the time it doesn't have, like it cannot pressure someone to do actually what's supposed to be done. But it's a record. So it's recorded, you know that you had that conversation. At the end of the day, it's about the trust and intention. And if one side abuses the intention, doesn't want to be fair or for real committed to the purpose, they no longer supposed to exist. This could be a big institution, comes with big legacy, but when they start not serving their purpose, they start killing and destroying themselves. It's not the other side, they're not doing it. Especially when they call for an institution which is doing that, it's trying to help the institution, not to destroy the institution, as we must see it from that perspective. That means that artists cannot be busy with their work anymore. They have to kind of remind the institution or museum or universities, you know, students, hey, come on, this is the purpose. You are here and we are here. Don't forget the purpose. Very core reason to exist. And they can disappear overnight. Even the biggest institutions, if they lose their credibility in the eyes of public, in the eyes of their collaborators. No patrons can save it.
Thank you. Just to kind of build on that point, you bring up time a lot. One of the kind of manifestos of the Silent University is about long-term engagement. Could you say something about the kind of resilience that you develop by the way of initiating through institutions and how that moves outside and has a kind of longevity to the work that you initiate?
It's very important to give the time what it needs, you know, things like Silent University, I knew already from the beginning that it's to be slower process, it needs to be long-term, and some of my projects are designed that way as well, so I don't try to fit myself to the speed of the art world or the hypes of the art world that comes and goes. Because if you adapt yourself to the hype version of the art world, what happens? That you go with it, and there is a lifetime of that, usually 5 years. An artist can become really big and disappear. An institution can become really big and disappear. Or a city, you know, a scene can appear and disappear also. And if you only strategize your engagement with community, with the art you do, with institutions, you will disappear with it. There is no way out. It doesn't matter if you made the most money or fame during that period. That does not matter. Really, there are names that when I started, they were all around, and there are most of them are not around. You know, there are waves that comes and goes. You know, so we really need to look what is needed to be done, what is relevant to really, you know, for the existence of those institutions and the purposes and the intentions. And these are not, can be, no contract also can be. So that's why principles are important. Ideological and ethical principles are important to define our own and also read the institutions as well at the same time to them when necessary, again and again.
Thank you. So how do you create an authentic experience? It's a big experience, and maybe to bring it back to art schools, do you think that says something about the way we learn to be artists?
Yeah, I mean, this year particularly, I feel like I'm just a new graduate from the art school, not with an unclear future. And for a long time I didn't feel this way, so it feels like I'm probably doing the right thing. Because if I start repeating myself, that's not so smart, for me as well. Because then you learn certain ways to exist, and you just keep up with them. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in constantly learning, and like really being curious. And otherwise, art wouldn't be interesting for me. A lot of artists or art institutions, I see they're more boring than other state institutions. They work more boring ways. They go to job more boring ways. Their studios more boring than another, like some of the state institutions, you would imagine the most boring offices and things. Like they can be more entertaining, when you go visit. So we should not put ourselves in those kind of mentalities, because when you want to be safe, then you are not good for, like, if you're a professor at university, which I am not, then you are really not good for your students. If you're a museum director or curator, you're not good for, the younger curators, that are interns or others. So it's very important that we don't get stuck in our comfort zones.
But there's a whole space there. We're all talking about really this nebulous place in the art world, which is probably one of the least organised still kind of cultural structures between humans. It exists between the commercial, the institutional, the studio practice, and there's this intangible glue that brings us all together and is hard to understand. And when you spoke about contracts, it made me smile because at FORMA we're a small institution, so we're the buffer zone between the museums and the artists. So we commission and then we take it to museums, and I tell every artist, let me see your contract, write a contract, and they're like, no, I know the curator, it's fine. I'm like, you don't need a contract until the day you needed that contract. And there's those little moments, but I think there's something about your practice, because there's so much optimism in all your work. You're always seeking the better ending for any scenario, the VIP lounge, the Sally University, all of these activities. But it made me think of this George Orwell quote where he went around talking to different people around society, labourers, workers, teachers, and asked them, like, why don't you self-organise? Why don't you ask for better wages? Why don't you insist on better working conditions? And the answer George Orwell was getting back was they won't allow it. And George Orwell was like, who is this they? And no one could really answer. They said, they are omnipresent. And I feel like in a lot of your work, you're addressing this omnipresent force that exists in the cultural world, but in society at large, which somehow we know exists, but we can't always quite put our finger on it. Is it the institution? Is it the funders? Is it the politics? Is it nationalism? And I'm interested in how you're addressing that. Do you even know when you were starting the project?
Yeah, I saw that position means nothing. Someone can be super scared director, like scared of their own shadow, and they have no power. And I pity them, I'm sorry for them. We talk, I feel sorry for them. I don't feel sorry for me. I'm talking to someone who is in position, in power, right? But sometimes I see a human, and good human, but in a powerful position, and really want to change things, but there are a lot of parameters. And then I would like to have a conversation with the person and think through from their so-called powerful-looking position, because I see also the wonder who is there. If you only focus on ourselves, like, I don't have any institution making me up, I'm independent artist, forever. But I behave from this perspective as like, this is our collective cultural heritage, let's take care of it together. Let's save the things that are supposed to be saved. Let's get rid of the parts we don't need ever exist. So this approach doesn't matter, because institutions come and go. Usually people think people come and go. Same person moves to another institution or become independent. This person doesn't die, and still have a lot of solidarity networks around them, and we need to always stay in touch. And every now and then we encounter each other in different, maybe one of us officially within the institution at that moment, the other one is outside. That doesn't mean that person doesn't have credibility. Let's forget all these illusions of that moment, whatever is looking more official or more institutional. we are all together collectively the institutions or the creator of the institution or makers, including the public.
Yes, I'll follow up on this because I read a quote from you in an interview, and the art world, or we're used to transactional ways of measuring progression or success, financial transaction or institutional celebration, and you were quoted in an interview saying, "I believe in the currency of collective consciousness," and I always think, well, your end game is not your personal to cultivate artists, and it's not. Obviously, money is important, we all need to live, but what you seem to strive for is this moment where in these moments like this, we all agree on something and maybe slowly make a change together.
Yeah, this was 2014 or something, I said that, and I still believe in it, but in a different way. At the time, I believed in artists more. Now I believe in artists generally, less. I don't put them in this special place, they are like the victims, and they are like, they can become at times the most important, when they think of themselves. So there's no hierarchy among artists, curators, critics, and so on. I call them culture workers, and still from that perspective, I believe in this currency of collective consciousness.
I wanted to go back to this quote or an article that's been a really big source of inspiration for me, and it was written by a British artist in the 70s who taught at what's now called Central St Martin's in the 50s. And he wrote an article for The Guardian, which is a left-leaning big British broadsheet, if you don't know, and it was called The Murder of Art Schools. And he was writing in the context of Margaret Thatcher in the UK, so the kind of corporisation of education, and some of the things that you picked up on, so the huge rise in fees. When I was a student, it was free to go to university in England, and it's now 10,000 euros a year. And I was thinking about, I guess, kind of Walter Benjamin, and is it possible to change the machine? To build on what Chris was saying, what is the role of artists in social change?
I would be, I'm not a professor anywhere, right? So it's my topic. There has been quite a few theses written about some of these projects discussed in the academic world. Things I initiated, but somehow I am not an academician. What is the paradox about this? Am I supposed to slave myself to go through all this application processes to the people who were not only supposed to be there for the first place? If they were not taking mainstream universities to the corporate directions today we are in. I'm very sorry for most of the students, especially in specific countries like US or UK, it gets harder and harder and more expensive. I just saw an article in Canada, one student flies from one city to another city daily because it's too expensive to live there to do the studies. And flying, it was cheaper or something. Absurd situations are happening in order to be able to study, imagine sometimes art. And this makes no sense to me, And for me, knowledge exchange doesn't only exist, especially actually less and less exists in academic environments. So everyone within the academy, students create their own gatherings and meetings. Some good teachers, they meet their students separately outside of the academy and so on. And a lot of things done by the guest professors, because full-time professors they don't like the students and they don't want to work most of the time. So they're tired of it or lazy, but they're lazy to also quit their jobs. So this kind of, it's not a healthy environment when universities become more and more corporations, larger museums following the same direction. So it's really lost the main purpose long ago. And we do it through alternative structures, and the structures actually are the main structures. They are not the alternatives for me. Things like Castro is not an alternative structure, it's a main structure to learn from, or all those examples we have looked.
We're almost out of time, do you mind if I ask them some questions?
Slip a quick one in before you.
Yeah, common questions.
Keira's got a really good one. I just wanted to finish with a quick provocation, because I know Gary said you like a provocation, but I wanted to just bring it back to what's happening right now in the world around shutdowns, censorship. We're seeing responses to the war in Palestine. We're seeing nationalistic right-wing governments, and one of their first actions is to shut down academics, to shut down artists, and I know you've spoken about this a lot in the past, but it's happening right now. And I was wanting to ask you, and this is not so much about pedagogy alone, but just culture. And is art and artists and culture the victim of their own success? Because there's obviously something happening that is scaring authorities and they want to shut it down. Or is it the failure of artists and the art world to enact change?
Well, yes, most of the time institutions takes less and less risk these days, so they have seen as harmless, right? In these situations, like I am as a person in public space, always up to for random checks. Happens in my hometown a lot, in the Turkish parts or any parts of the world. I am the first one to pick and stop and check. And this is now happening also where Germany, where I'm doing part-time. And like I know about the random checks, it's about racial profiling and all this stuff. And then let's go back to the art world's role. You know, it's interesting in Turkey actually the government was thinking always the writers were the most dangerous, so they were the ones first to jail, and then during the uprising, architects became suddenly the most dangerous architects, and then they were all like they had court cases, and and then filmmakers and the artists would be the last in the list, and now slowly they are also like, we see what you're doing kind of situation. You can also transform societies. You are not just elitists and dealing with small groups of art elite. So we need to reach out bigger crowds, but as always, art came after all these other things when it comes to crowd thinking effects. But art, not that art becomes more brave, government becomes more conservative. I mean, it's insane, like the news I shared yesterday, that Irish protesters in Berlin, pro-Palestine protesters, were banned from speaking Irish. I mean, this is insane in Germany. And also hearing some German artists supposed to be international social language, political artists saying that it's all because of this English-speaking artist based here doesn't understand the local politics because they don't speak the local language. It's the oppressive language. It's not the local language. Science is about, for instance, having all the languages in the room present. But you don't argue to the oppressive language. You argue to all the multiple languages and cultures that exist in the space without all this profiling and things. So not that art becomes more brave, it's less and less brave. Government becomes more aggressive. This is what I said in UK when I was going there. I needed visa to go for a big show in a big institution. They said they will lose their license. This was pre-Brexit. They will lose their license if they invite me on the basis of business visitor visa. And I told the curator, this was before Brexit, I said, if you don't fight back to your governments, this is not my problem, this is your problem. Are you aware of that? If you don't fight back to your government, you will become more and more local. You can't invite international artists anymore. And this is what happened. I was trying, and there was a lot of they didn't get it what I'm trying to say. It's like, yeah, it's fine, I don't count it, this is an official. They wanted me to get a permit to show up for 2 days opening, one night hotel. It's like this to get a permit in UK. And this mentality, because government pressuring the institutions, art institutions to pressure back, and they are the first one to expect among all the state institutions to be the locomotive, to the instigator of these debates, to keep up freedom zones. Otherwise, we lose the public spaces, we lose freedom zones. We saw that happen in Turkey more and more. Biennial was a public event, became more and more private spaces events. So these things we need to reclaim the public spaces and other places as well. But now I see what's happening in Europe is that for medieval times, when it comes to Palestine topic now, It's medieval times we are experiencing, and if it was happening in other countries, they would just call it like dictatorship or totalitarian regimes. You know, this is absurd. Like, we need to sit back and think about this. This is absurd, and we, in future generations, will make fun of this situation, you know, themselves. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a kind of utopian question to finish, but I think one of the things I think about is the route to mainstream visibility in the art world's relatively professionalised and narrow, and there are obviously lots of exceptions to that, but if you scan just about any Biennale list, the majority of the artists will have attended art school. And I think for me it speaks to something troubling about the role art schools play in delineating the boundaries between the inside and the outside. And I wondered if you could talk about your vision or ideal school for the future.
Modernist Soviet-style Anatolian University to study painting. I know you both studied painting too, so everybody knows. And our professor, first thing he said was like, among 40 of you, one of you might become an artist. What a motivational talk. We have 4 years ahead. I was like, great. I hate all my friends. You know, so I don't know, but that doesn't matter. You know, it's a bad way to start art school. And I had to outsource everything about contemporary art. We were just going to school and secretly doing contemporary art. You know, like I think that we were doing video works or photography-based works. It was not really part of our education. So it was a self-taught process. School was an excuse, and it's still an excuse, no matter where. If you go to a big city, big school, it is just an excuse. If you're lucky, you bump into one good professor, a mentor, you can bump into that person at an opening or on the street or in your school. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be your official teacher. And you just collect your mentors and you do your studies, you know. So basically it's like self-taught and also creating this environment that they trust you before anybody else. They show you that to you and you get that confidence through those people that they didn't have to take a minute to spend time with you, but they do. So some people are also like that. You don't usually find that in the universities. You find that everywhere else. If you're lucky, you have one of that in your school, so it's the other way around. One of those professors is the professor.
That's
something like that.
A good place to end. I think we've got about 10-15 minutes for questions, if people would like to ask anything. Do you want people to use the mic?
I have no idea. I don't know. Do you really want people to use the mic? No. And as always with Castro, if you want to ask your question in another language, that might be fine. We're going to find someone that translates. So, yeah.
I actually don't have any questions, but it was like so nice to hear because as a self-taught artist, so I don't have an art education. And before art, I was working in 3D industry, which was quite commercial, but there already was present with education peer-to-peer. And it was like not important at all if you finish the university, they only look to your portfolio, they look at you. And it was like way more natural, you know? And before starting out, they thought, okay, maybe like artists are so open-minded, so it's supposed to be there. And when I actually like encountered the system, it surprised me for like way more like, you know, how to say, standardized and everything, and there are just a few people who actually get this, which was like a huge surprise for me, because you expect like, you know, something like, okay, arts look to the future, but then like, oh no.
It comes from the past these days. Unfortunately, I have to explain this to all my friends who hardcore work in commercial sides of the things, and they're like, I wish I was an artist like you know, do all this exhibition, travel the world and be free and do, you know, just use my creativity. I'm like, great, yeah. Sure, it is like that. I don't deal with any of the other things now. This is how it looks from outside, unfortunately. You have to explain it's not the case. But doesn't mean it's not fun, you know. It's really important to make fun of institutions that are scared of their shadows and empower the other institutions that they are braver than their own capacities. And same for the other individuals, you know. So, and you see what? You see magic. So I've seen so many times magic happened in the art world because the definition is so like abstract and people really believe in these things naively. And I think that naivety is important, that we need to keep it present, that we should also believe that it is possible within the art world to do so. And I have witnessed that it's possible many times. So I wouldn't just cancel it, you know, like I'm quitting art and canceling this whole thing, it's all fake. No, it's not like that. It's like a space for magic when you believe it's possible.
Any other questions?
Also, just another note that I really like, when you were talking about the silent university and how it started, when people were invited, they are maybe, as I understood, like migrants mostly, right? Who didn't have like a bank accounts and everything. Maybe people
displaced people.
Yeah, displaced people. And this was amazing that you not only focus on the educational approach, but also on paying them, which like not everyone thinks about. But this is amazing for people, and maybe it's encouraged them to actually continue. Like maybe they were teachers, or maybe they were doctors, or maybe they were like, I don't know, like artists. And it's actually encouraged them to also getting some like reward, so that they like have a prize in this world, let's say. So this is great, really. It's not a question, I just like really appreciate that moment of like practical thinking as well.
It has been very long. Like, if you don't have questions, I don't want to keep you all here.
I think I
But I have one request.
You can ask in private. Ask us, you will find us. Yes, you're our host.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.